I'm here with Eddie of Imminence to talk about the latest record, The Black, out April 12th on Believe. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining me for this chat. Is that your dog?
Yeah, both dogs here.
Oh, for a minute
Yeah,
there, they're so quiet and still. Is that a real dog?
yeah.
All right, I got distracted. Sorry about that.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's the pleasure is all mine. Let's start off by talking a little bit about the artwork, because I'm intrigued by it. What does it mean? What's the significance and the symbolism of the artwork on this record?
So, we've been working with the same designer for all of our album artworks, actually. He's a long-term friend now, and we always had these, we had him create a unique symbol for each release. And this was something that we wanted to do with the black as well. The only difference was that when we started writing for the album, um, we kind of decided we're going to release songs as we go along before the album was even finished. But we wanted to still have that element in place, to have the symbolism in place and utilize that in our universe and in the music videos, etc. So we started to bounce some ideas back and forth for the symbol, and with the first few songs we wrote, we definitely felt like there was something darker about it. There was just this feeling around it, and we thought, like, what if we take something like inspiration from something gothic, like gothic architecture, and have this symbol kind of develop over the time as we're writing the album, um, and having it fill in with each single that we release.
Wow, you guys put a lot of thought process going into this. I thought it was just like, oh, it's just a cool picture, but no, I like the fact that everything kind of ties in. And once I pressed play on the record, it was immediately obvious to me that this is going to be perhaps the best metalcore album of 2024. At least at the very
Thank
least, you
you.
guys are setting the bar to what everybody should be striving to achieve with this album. But I was intrigued by the choice in terms of the track listing and in terms of the overall design, because it feels like a little bit of a record of two sides. With the first side of the album a little bit more direct, a little bit more intense to the point, and then the second half of the album, because of the instrumental tracks, allowing that same intensity to dilute itself a little bit more. Uh,
Mm.
was that a conscious effort to create this sort of two different sides of the same coin?
I think that actually the track list is in almost in order of when we wrote the songs. And even though we didn't have like the full concept of the album in place at the beginning, it did feel like it was this darkness that kept pulling us in deeper and deeper into this process. And that was apparent to us towards the end, and um, when we decided the title track and everything, that this was the thing that kind of fueled the whole album. This was the darkness and that void that is kind of pulling you in. And for me, it feels like the track list is is kind of expanding on that feeling. It's like you're going deeper and deeper down into this darkness.
So when you reach the deeper end, and you have those more instrumental tracks at the bottom end of the record, is that a little bit of a moment of clarity within that darkness? Do you see that?
Yeah, I think they are, just like, if you're going through something hard, or if you're going through a depression, or having dark thoughts, sometimes you have a lot to say, sometimes you're angry or you're sad, but sometimes you have also nothing to say. And I think that these tracks really give give that aspect of this feeling on this album, and leave you kind of with a little pause for reflection, if you will.
You mentioned the process going into this record, from the artwork to the ideas to the concept to how everything came together. I don't think this is anything new for you guys coming into this album. You guys always came across to me as a band that puts a lot of thought process into everything that goes into making a record. But when you look at the debut album and you look at this album, where do you see the biggest growth from the band?
Mm, interesting. I think, for example, that this album is the first time you kind of can hear that we're going back to our roots. Like you can, if you enjoy the Black, you might actually enjoy a few songs off our debut album as well. I just think it's a lot more refined, a lot more thought through, and I feel like you can hear um, our progress as a band over the years if you compare the two releases.
I like the word refined because this album has a very refined sound. I mean, the sound quality and the ability that you guys had to create a record that's super textured, but you're able to see all the different elements of the sound coming together as one, was one thing that really won me over on this album. Is that a reflection of your growth as musicians in terms of what you can now put forward, or there's also an impact from a production standpoint that allows the sound to be that refined?
Um, I mean, we've been producing the last three albums ourselves, including this one. And I think it just, you learn a lot over the time and the more you create. And what I wanted to do on this album was kind of letting everything be important. So, for example, one of my best friends who's also producing music, he once told me like, what's the point of having something in the song if you can't really hear it? So I wanted to kind of give these breathers as well, like let the main instruments, the guitars, the bass, the drums, sometimes just shine by themselves. You don't necessarily need anything in the background. And then on other spaces, I wanted to, bring forth something interesting, something textured to create a different atmosphere. And I really wanted this album to feel cinematic and and grand.
Is there a fine line between that refined sound and not refining it to the point that you take a little bit of the intensity of the emotional drive that it's a huge part of your music?
It's always dependent on, what kind of emotion are you getting out of this part, for example. Are the instruments itself or themselves enough? Do they say enough, or is there something more to say in that particular part?
You look at it from that standpoint, like do you break it down like that on a track by track basis?
Yeah, I mean, when you're writing, it's kind of instinctively like sometimes you don't feel like you need to add anything to it, and sometimes you have a sense that something is missing, and you kind of just work based on that feeling.
Are you a perfectionist from that standpoint? Like when it's time to create a new song, I'm not even talking about a record in general. Like you said, the approach was pretty much a track by track approach. So when you're looking at creating a song, do you look at every single aspect of what makes that song tick in order for the sound of Imminence to really come through, to really shine?
Mm, I mean, uh, it's a bit different, I guess, from song to song. Sometimes I can go like be very much like a perfectionist about something and really dive into it and make sure that everything is just the way I want it. But sometimes I'm also able to uh, settle with something if I feel like it makes me happy. I think it's important to um, not overwork things as well. Um, it needs to have a good flow and be in the moment. That's the way I feel about it. Like you should have a good stomach feeling when you're creating it, and it should be easy. it's not always easy, but it should be.
Did you ever think that the violin would become such an integral part of not only the sound of the band, but the image, the DNA? I mean, when you talk to somebody about Imminence, the violin is almost something that comes in the conversation because it's become such a integral part of what the band's, like I said, sound and image is all about. Did you ever imagine that that would be the case?
No, I didn't really think about it that way. When we first started out, it was almost like, oh, I can't use the violin in the music, but we did have some string arrangements on our debut album. But I never really felt like I was a capable violinist in terms of being a soloist, for example. So it never really came up as an idea, and that wasn't until we started writing our third album, Turn the Light On, and I think it was actually Infectious that was, the first song where we really gave the violin its own moment to shine and act as a lead instrument. And it was kind of just on a whim. It just felt right. It sounded good, and we started incorporating it more and more from that point, and it kind of just happened. And yeah, and as you say, like a lot of people seem to have picked up on that and enjoy that aspect of Imminence.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the comment sections of the videos, everybody always talks about Violin Core and all sorts of cool nicknames, which I think it's great because you guys really integrated such a cool instrument that perhaps a lot of people didn't think would go well with the music, but it goes extremely well. On this record, it's phenomenal. It's more of a layer. It doesn't feel as a driving element. You guys definitely gave more room to the guitars, drums, and bass to shine, but it's such an integral part of the atmosphere that the record has. Was that your thought process coming in that we're going to use it and we're going to use a lot of it, but not necessarily as a main character?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does have its moment as the main characters in this record. Um, but I really wanted to do something different with the string arrangement on this record compared to our previous two releases. And I wanted it to feel, I was quite inspired when we did a live in studio session from our previous album when we used the string quartet and rewrote some of the arrangements for it to fit better to have them playing live, and that really inspired me for this album. And I used that as a basis of thought where I imagine ourselves playing with a string quartet and try to hear what would they do in this part. And I really wanted this album to feel cinematic and let those strings, the four piece, have a big role in the songs. And when I approach writing violin for myself, like as the solo violin, I don't like to force it in. Sometimes it's better as maybe a little layer, or a little melody over one part. But for me, the song is always the most important. And sometimes you have those moments where you feel like, oh, here's perfect moment for me to shine with the violin. For example, in Come What May is a good example of that.
So are you a violinist that sings, or are you a singer that plays the violin?
um, Perhaps a singer that plays violin.
Well, for a singer that plays the violin, you do a fantastic job. Your
Thank you.
vocal performance on this record is, in my humble opinion, the best I've heard from you on any record. It
Thank
felt
you.
super emotional, very connected, not just with the lyrical content, but with the sound that you guys created for the songs. Is this, every album is personal to a certain degree, but is this maybe a more personal album for you, and that's where that performance comes from?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, our music has always been very personal to me. Um, but I did really feel like I was able to dig deep in myself and pull out some things that I haven't been able to do before. And as a vocalist, I think it's really interesting as you're growing older, that you kind of can discover new things about your voice. And when we started writing and recording for this album, I really tried to push myself in certain areas and found it really interesting that I was able to do things that I haven't been able to do before.
When did you discover your voice? Was that something that you always wanted to be a singer, that you aspired to be as a little kid, or it was something that happened a little bit more natural and out of the blue?
In that case, maybe I'm a violinist that also sings, but because I started playing the violin when I was 5, and like singing didn't come to me until I was a teenager. You know, we were just getting into rock and metal music, and a couple of friends wanted to, start playing cover songs in the basement, and I kind of didn't have an instrument to play. Like if you're gonna play rock covers and you're, 14 years old, you're not thinking about using your violin. So I kind of liked to sing. I like to sing along to the bands that I listen to. So, I gave it a shot, found that I really enjoyed it, and then kind of went on from that.
Wow. Did you take any lessons? Did you look for professional help in order to develop that instrument of yours?
Um, I did try like for maybe a year to take a few vocal lessons at the local music school, but it was more classic type of singing. And when I was coming up and started to do screaming, there wasn't much information to be found about that. There wasn't any YouTube tutorials or things like that. So I just had to learn for myself how to develop that technique in a safe way.
Wow, really interesting. Do you, when you look at the lyrical content for any song, for any record, but more specifically to this one, where do you pull those lyrics from? Do you write them even before you have songs? Do you listen to the sound that was created and that inspires the lyrics? What's the process for you?
Um, I mostly scribbled down things, so um, typically I wouldn't write lyrics for a whole song. I would just write down phrases that comes up to me. And I use something that I call like subconscious writing. So it's not necessarily, thinking so much about how to put a feeling into words. It's more like letting the words come to me. And when we then start, with putting songs together, I'm typically looking through all my scribbled notes and see if something fits, um, and kind of base that and let the song inspire me as well. Um,
Do you look at the lyrics of some of the songs that you wrote and allow yourself to have some flashbacks into where those lyrics now can take you? Do you take learning lessons from the stories that you have written?
yeah, I mean, it's not so often that I reflect back like that, but if you look back on a song that you wrote 7 years ago or something, you can definitely see what I was maybe going through at that time or how I felt for sure.
When it comes to playing live, what would you consider to be the most demanding song from your standpoint?
Mm, that's a good question. Um, recently, I think "Death by a Thousand Cuts," one of our newer singles, is it's quite difficult to perform. Um, because of the very very high screams and extended and long screams throughout the chorus, um, makes it a challenging song.
You guys have, speaking of playing live, you guys have a tour coming up in the next couple of weeks. You guys are coming to North America, playing North American, well, a US tour.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not your first tour in the US. The last tour, you guys played some Canadian shows. How come no Canada on this tour run? I was excited to see you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we did two shows in Canada last winter, and we went ahead and did a full US run for this tour in the spring. So I don't know, but we hope to return to Canada soon again, for sure.
You know, I know we have a rivalry with Sweden when it comes to hockey and all of that stuff. You know, but there's also a lot of love in Toronto. I mean, we love Matt Sundin, you know, like I mean, we love our Swedes here. So maybe
Yeah.
you guys have to consider a Canadian tour run or something along those lines, because uh, Toronto will definitely be missing you guys on this North American run that you guys are going to do.
Yeah, we felt like maybe it was too soon to return to Toronto after playing there just a few months back. Um, but I think we'll definitely include you guys on the next one.
I really hope so. I really hope so. And I don't think
Yeah,
it's too
we love
soon.
to play in Toronto. It was a great show. So
Yeah, I unfortunately I was sick. I couldn't go because I was really looking forward to seeing you guys live, and I couldn't go. I got sick, and then when this tour got announced, I was looking at the dates, and I'm like, oh, we didn't make the list. You know what I mean? So I definitely hope you guys come back, because I think you're one of those bands that you could play here almost every month, and the place would still sell out.
thank you for saying that.
Well, especially with this album, honestly, I kudos to you guys. I didn't think you guys,
Thank you.
with every album, you guys are setting the bar higher and higher. And I always feel like, okay, we can only go downwards now because you know you've reached such a high plateau of quality. And then when I put this album on, I was like, I was expecting to be disappointed because there's got to be a shitty album in your discography, which is still not the case. That still hasn't happened. And I put this record on and I had to blare it out to the world in social media. And I had to say that this is definitely the best metalcore album of 2024. Bands will have to look to you guys to see what they need to do in order to surpass it. I don't think there's a better album out there in terms of the energy, the emotion, the sound. You know, phenomenal album top to bottom.
Wow, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it.
You know, to use a North American expression, you guys hit a home run.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eddie, thank you very much for your time. All the best on this American run. I wish you guys nothing but success at every single stop. I wish you guys to sell a lot of merch and have the success that you deserve with this incredible album, The Black, once again out April 12th. And I hope to see you soon. And the next time you guys are in Toronto, I'll try to set up something in person because I'd love to meet you guys and talk to you
Yeah.
about maybe about hockey. Maybe if you're into hockey, we can go to the Hockey Hall of Fame or something like that.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. All the best. Take care, man.
You too. You too.